President Joe Biden declared a new U.S. policy toward Taiwan for the third time, only to have his officials insist that nothing has changed. That may appease the public, but other countries, particularly the People's Republic of China, are not fooled. In this video, we'll see whether Americans are prepared to fight a nuclear war over Taiwan. Curious to know? Let's find out. The president's statement roiled the region during his trip to East Asia, which was intended to persuade friends and allies that Uncle Sam can walk and chew gum at the same time. When asked if he would defend Taiwan, he said, "Yes, it's a commitment we made." His words flew around the world at breakneck speed, appearing to repudiate Washington's policy of strategic ambiguity, in which the US refused to clarify its position on a Chinese attack on Taiwan. Since the Carter administration severed diplomatic ties with Taiwan, officially the Republic of China, and recognized the People's Republic of China, America's defense ties with Taipei have been ambiguous. Washington maintains unofficial diplomatic ties with the island state and is legally obligated to sell its defensive weapons. Taiwan, on the other hand, does not have a defense treaty, as Japan and South Korea do, nor any other formal military commitment, making American policy a simple maybe. In theory, the uncertainty and risk of losing US support should deter Taipei from recklessly challenging Beijing. Simultaneously, the PRC is expected to avoid military action if Washington decides to intervene. America has achieved the best of both worlds. However, the inverse outcome is also possible. The Taiwanese may believe that after 8 decades of cooperation and war and peace, the US will intervene on their behalf. The Chinese may conclude that no rational American president would jeopardize Los Angeles for Taipei. In fact, strategic ambiguity appears to be an excuse to avoid making a decision. As long as policymakers are not required to give a clear yes or no, they are not required to make a clear yes or no decision. And they can simply hope that the contingency does not arise. This strategy, however, is becoming increasingly untenable. Although there is no indication of imminent Chinese military action, Michael Swain of the Quincy Institute notes that this possibility cannot be discounted over the longer term if current trends continue. Beijing appears to be losing patience. Chinese President Xi Jinping has spoken out against the issue being passed down from generation to generation. The PRC has increased diplomatic and military pressure on Taiwan, while the brutal crackdown in Hong Kong suggests that the Xi administration has given up on using the Special Administrative Region as a model for negotiating voluntary reunification. Furthermore, time may be on China's side. The People's Republic of China faces serious demographic, economic, and political challenges, which are being exacerbated by the Xi regime's zero-COVID policy. Beijing officials are well aware that pro-PRC sentiment in Taiwan is dwindling, particularly among the young. Finally, among the many lessons that Russia's attack on Ukraine could teach Xi, the importance of a quick victory may be the most important. As a result, policymakers in the United States should be aware of their thoughts. If China takes action, they must be prepared to respond. This could imply a global mobilization of diplomatic and economic power against Beijing. This could imply indirectly harming Chinese interests, such as prohibiting trade with and air travel to the PRC. Most seriously, this could imply intervening directly against Chinese military forces. In any case, Washington should be prepared to act or not act and not be caught off guard if Beijing strikes. Most importantly, the issue should be addressed right away. Within the Beltway, the largely unspoken consensus appears to be that, of course, Washington should intervene. Most foreign policy experts believe that the United States would not respond militarily. The main point of contention recently has been whether strategic ambiguity should be replaced with strategic clarity, as the president appeared to do. The American people, however, should be consulted immediately, according to Representative Michael McCall, ranking member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee. He said he's not sure how many Americans would go to war over a tiny island they don't know anything about. And if they fully comprehended the cost of defending Taiwan from China, including the possibility of conventional defeat and nuclear disaster, they might strongly oppose it. If a crisis erupts, the president must be ready to act, and Congress must be ready to vote. Most importantly, the latter should carry out its constitutional duty by debating a declaration of war, which is required for a presidential decision to intervene militarily. Such a significant decision necessitates an informed citizenry. Aside from protecting the mainland, Taiwan is China's most important strategic objective. Beijing's leadership, as well as the majority of Chinese, including younger generations, whom I have found to be profoundly nationalistic even when otherwise liberal, consider Taiwan to be part of China. Japan took the island from the decaying Chinese Empire in 1895 and returned it after the latter's defeat in 1945. The Chinese Communist Party overthrew the ROC and forced the Nationalist Party government to flee to Taiwan in 1949. The ROC maintained a separate existence, backed by the US military, but gradually lost the diplomatic game as the rest of the world, including America, formally accepted only one China and recognized the PRC. For the mainland leadership, reuniting the two, which means subordinating Taiwan to the PRC, is the final step in ending the century of humiliation in which China was invaded and occupied by foreign forces. The only comparable American experience in terms of raw nationalism is the American Civil War, during which Northerners refused to allow secession. After the 11 Southern states seceded over slavery, the national government fought over the Union, killing approximately 750,000 Americans, or roughly 8 million in today's terms. Policymakers in the United States want to believe that America will triumph. Some, such as former Defense Secretary and CIA Director Leon Panetta, believe that simply threatening to intervene is enough to protect Taipei and that the PRC will back down. All the US has to do is declare its willingness to act, and the Chinese leadership will retreat to Zhongnanhai with their heads bowed and accept American suzerainty for the rest of their lives. Others either believe America will win or simply ignore the possibility of defeat. They ignore the likely consequences because they believe Washington must act. Everything must simply succeed. Fighting the PRC over Taiwan, on the other hand, would be nothing like America's recent military experience. Iraq and Afghanistan were cakewalks in comparison to the high-intensity war against the well-armed and highly motivated People's Liberation Army, which was well-stocked with missiles and a growing nuclear arsenal. At worst, air and naval combat between the United States and the People's Republic of China would transport Americans back to World War II's Pacific Campaign, which no one wants to relive, with a nuclear twist if such weapons were used against America. And Beijing appears prepared to go to war if necessary, though this is not its preferred option. Taiwan's negotiated surrender is desired by the PRC. In the event of war, some PRC officials believe the US would not fight, prompting the infamous taunt that America would not risk Los Angeles for Taipei. And that is a reasonable assumption based on normal interest balancing. Taiwan is far more important to China than America. Consider the PRC is declaring its readiness to defend Cuba from US aggression. That would appear equally absurd to Washington, especially given the Soviet Union's retreat in a similar situation 6 decades ago. Most Chinese leaders, on the other hand, appear to be more realistic, preparing for US intervention. Beijing benefits from the tyranny of distance. Taiwan is approximately 100 miles from the mainland, roughly the same distance as Cuba is from the United States. Taiwan, on the other hand, is over 7,000 miles from the American mainland and about 1,700 miles from Guam, the closest US possession. Washington is at a significant disadvantage because deterrence is easier and less expensive than project power. Worryingly, the United States usually loses war games involving a Taiwan conflict. Although Washington is developing strategies to counter the PRC's anti-access area denial capabilities, even with access to allied bases in the region, the US would struggle to prevail. Ground and naval forces would be vulnerable to missile strikes. Furthermore, despite Tokyo's tougher stance toward China and Seoul's new conservative government, there is no guarantee that either would join the US if war broke out. This would turn them into military targets and ensure long-term hostility from the PRC. The Allies would be especially hesitant to act if they believed Washington was at least partially to blame for starting the crisis in the first place. Ultimately, the United States may find itself devoting a large portion of its military budget at a time of rapidly increasing deficits as America's population ages, to combating a rising distant adversary in its own neighborhood over vital interests. And with that being said, it's time to end our video. But before that, we'd like to know your opinion about this. Let us know in the comments and make sure to subscribe to the channel for more amazing videos like this. We'll see you in the next video.